All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So it's a pleasure to have Claire Yee give our lunch talk today. Claire is a grad student at Northwestern University, where she works with Fred Rezio, and her work focuses on simulating globular clusters using Monte Carlo techniques. And she's going to tell us today about neutron star dynamics and radio pulsars in globular clusters. So Claire, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me here today. Let me try to share my screen. So let me know if you see it. Okay, great.
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. So feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. But today I'm going to talk about neutron stars and radio pulsars in globular clusters. So for my graduate study, I've been working on the formation and evolution of neutron stars in globular clusters. As we know, neutron stars and especially pulsars have been studied for a long time. They can provide insights into a wide range of physics, such as nuclear physics, binary evolution, and cluster dynamics. But although the research field of neutron stars is quite old, we still haven't fully understood how they were born and evolved. And here are some specific examples on why to study neutron stars and the pulsars. Pulsars are stable and precise clocks. They can be used to detect low-frequency gravitational waves from merging massive black hole binaries. Some of the very tight neutron star binaries can be used to test general relativity. And most recently, neutron stars have been connected to the newly discovered fast radio bursts. Globular clusters are specifically great places to study pulsars and neutron stars and their dynamics. So globular clusters are old and massive stellar systems that have roughly 1 million stars. They form at about the same time as the galaxy, and their half-mass radii are only about a few parsecs. So they're very compact and have very high densities around the center, as is shown here of a picture of a random globular cluster. They potentially contain a large number of compact objects, including black holes and pulsars. And indeed, because globular clusters are massive and dense, stellar encounters happen frequently in them, leading to the formation of exotic objects such as millisecond pulsars, low-mass X-ray binaries, and binary black hole mergers. It's now well understood that clusters produce these various sources at a higher rate per unit stellar mass compared to the isolated stellar evolution alone. So even though clusters only take over a fraction of the total stellar mass in the galaxies, they may contribute significantly to the total population of various exciting phenomena. And I structured this talk into 3 parts. I'll first talk about how I model pulsars in globular clusters, including their magnetic fields and spin periods. Then we'll show our latest models for the cluster 47 Tuc, which have good agreement with multiple observations. And last but not least, I'll look at how neutron star dynamics are coupled with the cluster's black hole population and the merger rates of binary neutron stars and neutron star black hole binaries from globular clusters. So here is the first part. As was just mentioned, globular clusters are very efficient at producing exotic objects, including pulsars. So far, 232 pulsars have been observed in 36 globular clusters. And the observed number keeps increasing rapidly thanks to multiple new radio telescopes. For the very massive and dense clusters like Tarzan 5 and 47 Tuc, each of them has more than 20 pulsars. Most of the other clusters have around 5. But the specific abundance of pulsars in globular clusters is an order of magnitude larger than that in the field. And this is again why it's so interesting to study neutron stars and pulsars in globular clusters. And most of the pulsars in clusters are what we call millisecond pulsars. In contrast, most of the pulsars in the galactic field are young radio pulsars. So this figure shows more clearly the differences between these two. This is usually referred to as the PP dot plot. The x-axis is the spin period and the y-axis is the spin down rate. So millisecond pulsars are usually crowded here, and they have spin periods that peak at about 4 to 5 milliseconds and low magnetic fields of about 10 to the 8 Gauss. But young pulsars are over here, and they have spin periods at around 1 second and large magnetic fields of about 10 to a 12 to 10 to a 14 Gauss. What's more, millisecond pulsars have lifetimes of about a Hubble time, and they're believed to be descendants of low-mass X-ray binaries. And many studies have suggested that accreting young pulsars or neutron stars are spun up to become millisecond pulsars from angular momentum transfer. And at the same time, their magnetic fields are buried by the accreted material. So millisecond pulsars have small magnetic fields than young pulsars. And to model globular clusters and the pulsars within, I use the cluster Monte Carlo code, also called CMC. CMC has been developed by many people from our group for about 2 decades now. It has a star-by-star realization where n particles represent n stars in a spherical potential. The star's initial positions and velocities are, in general, sampled from a distribution, and the masses of the stars are drawn from a realistic initial mass spectrum. CMC has all the relevant physics for cluster evolution, including two-body relaxation, strong 3- and 4-body interactions, and also single and binary star evolution. And it can simulate massive star clusters and is much faster than the direct n-body simulations. So a typical cluster model takes about 1 to 2 weeks with CMC. And I use simple prescriptions from Kia et al. To model pulsars in CMC. The initial magnetic fields and spin periods are sampled from Gaussian distributions to match the observed values. So young radio pulsars and millisecond pulsars have different initializations. So here, newly born young pulsars have large magnetic fields in the range of 10 to 12, 10 to 14 Gauss, and spin periods larger than 30 milliseconds. And millisecond pulsars are treated differently. I assume that they will not form in supernovae. I assume that all supernovae neutron stars end up as young pulsars. But the magnetic field and spin period of a millisecond pulsar will be reset if it went through a collision or a merger with other stars to these values here. So let's take a look at how CMC evolves pulsars. I won't go into all of the details, but neutron stars are treated as solid spheres. The rotation rate of isolated pulsars will slow down from magnetic dipole radiation, as is shown by the first equation here. And their magnetic field will decay slowly in a 3 gigayear timescale. So the tau is the timescale and it decays exponentially, where B0 is the initial magnetic field of a young pulsar. Pulsars in binaries that are accreting from their companions take a different evolutionary path. And as was mentioned, studies have suggested that pulsar magnetic fields are buried by the accreted material. And that's exactly what I'm assuming. The magnetic fields will decrease according to the amount of mass accreted. So here, M accrete is the amount of mass accreted. And the accreting pulsars will be spun up from angular momentum transfer from this equation here. But what about the formation and retention of neutron stars? Neutron stars can be formed in core collapse or electron-capture supernova. Which one happens depends on the initial mass and metallicity of the progenitor stars. Stars at less than 8 solar mass are likely to reach electron-capture supernova, and the more massive stars will undergo core collapse supernova. Electron capture collapse can also happen to a white dwarf if the white dwarf is in a binary and is accreting mass, and this is the so-called accretion-induced collapse. For both scenarios, the oxygen neon core of the star or of the white dwarf will collapse to a neutron star if it's more massive than about 1.38 solar mass. So this plot shows the simple what's happening simply with electron capture or accretion-induced collapse. When the electron pressure is reached, the magnesium and neon inside stars started to capture the electrons, and then the core of the star then loses the electron pressure and it collapses to a neutron star. And the good thing about electron capture supernova is that its explosion energy is believed to be far smaller than core collapse supernova. So newly born neutron stars from electron capture supernova receive smaller natal kicks. And in our CMC code, the velocity dispersion of the kick is assumed to be 20 kilometers per second, while neutron stars from core collapse supernova have 10 times larger natal kicks. And the small natal kick is very significant for the retention of neutron stars in globular clusters. And that's because the escape speed of a cluster is typically smaller than 100 kilometers per second. So most of the neutron stars formed in core collapse supernova will escape at the time of formation. But on the other hand, neutron stars from electron capture supernova are very likely to be retained because they have small natal kick. So overall, only about 8% of all neutron stars ever formed in a typical cluster are retained. And most of them are from electron capture supernova. And more than 90% of the millisecond pulsars in the simulations have a neutron star progenitor that form in electron capture supernova. And among the millisecond pulsars, accretion-induced collapse contributes the most of 68%. This is not surprising since it requires a binary for accretion-induced collapse to happen, as I mentioned, while binaries are also required to produce millisecond pulsars because you need mass transfer to spin the neutron stars up. So let's now take a closer look at how a single millisecond pulsar is formed in the simulations to understand the importance of the dynamical process. And just want to point out that this is just one representative example here in the plot. Different pulsars can evolve from different trajectories. And this plot is showing the spin period on the x-axis and the magnetic field on the y-axis. In globular clusters, an isolated young pulsar can acquire a companion through stellar encounters, or binaries that are too wide to undergo Roche-Loeb overflow can be tightened during dynamical interactions. And this is essential since millisecond pulsars are formed through extended periods of mass transfer. And that requires a companion star in a tight orbit. So for example, if we look at this plot on the right here, the x-axis is the spin period and the y-axis is the magnetic field. This neutron star or young pulsar here is formed from a core collapse electron capture supernova at the early time of the cluster's evolution. It stayed in isolation for a while until at about 6 gigayear, it undergo a few dynamical interactions. And during this interaction, the neutron star, the isolated neutron star, got a companion. And this companion starts to transfer mass to the neutron star. So the neutron star goes this way, the spin period of the neutron star decreases and the magnetic field also decreased. And in this process, this neutron star actually briefly went under this black dashed line, which is called the pulsar death line. And below this line, a pulsar is considered unobservable. But then at a bit of a later time, this neutron star binary have dynamical interactions, again, different ones. And these dynamical interactions bring the neutron star a new companion star. This companion star also transfer mass to the neutron star and finally spin the neutron star up to millisecond pulsar at the present day. So about 70% of the millisecond pulsars are formed through this kind of dynamically influenced evolution. And because of these frequent dynamical interactions in dense globular clusters, there are so many more millisecond pulsars per mass in clusters than in the field. And I was talking about how we model pulsars and how the dynamical process will influence their evolution. It's important to check if the model pulsars agree with the observations, and this plot is trying to show that they do. So this is again a PP dot plot. The blue dots show the observed pulsars, and the orange dots show the intrinsic properties of model pulsars. And green dots show the two limits of the model pulsar spin down rates when taking into account the line of sight acceleration from the cluster's potential. So what that is that the line of sight acceleration of pulsars are greatly affected by the cluster's potential, and it can be either positive or negative, as is shown here. So that's why there are two sides of this plot here, one positive, one negative. And basically, and one orange dot corresponds to two green dots. And we can see that the observations are overlapped and within the limits of the model pulsar spin down rates. And this shows that the models match well with the observations. And this is the first time ever any cluster simulation is able to model realistic pulsar populations. So I will switch gear a little bit here. As was shown at the beginning of this talk, 47 Tuc hosts the second largest population of radio pulsars in the Milky Way globular clusters. And here I will present a 47 Tuc model, and this model matches various observations simultaneously, including the large number of detected radio pulsars. But other than pulsars, why do we want to model 47 Tuc? 47 Tuc is one of the closest globular clusters to us at about 4.5 kiloparsec. It's also the second brightest globular clusters in the sky and can be seen by the naked eye in some places. Observations have shown that it is also one of the most massive and dense globular clusters in the Milky Way, and contains large populations of compact objects, including a few hundred X-ray sources, of course, millisecond pulsars, cataclysmic variables, and also a black hole candidate in an X-ray binary. So this all make 47 Tuc one of the best targets to study dynamical evolution of globular clusters and the compact objects within. And there exists plenty of observational data on 47 Tuc just because it's so bright and so close to Earth. But because of 47 Tuc's mass and density, it is very computationally challenging to model. Only two previous studies modeled 47 Tuc with n-body simulations, but they all have some significant caveats or inconsistencies. One study does not have a realistic number of black holes, and the other uses low mass cluster models and then scale them up to make a 47 Tuc model. So that's why it is necessary to simulate 47 Tuc with self-consistent models, which include all the relevant components. And here shows our best fit for 7-Tuc model simulated with CMC. This figure shows the comparisons between the model properties and the observed 47-Tuc properties. The top panel is the surface brightness profiles. The yellow and blue dots are the observations, and the black curve is our best fit model. And the green dash and dotted line show the fits from the 2 previous studies. The middle panel is the velocity dispersion profiles. The black dots are again from our best fit models, and all the different other color dots are observations. And the bottom panel is the number density profile, where the black curve is still the best fit model, and the dots are the observations. And from these 3 panels, we can see that our best fit for 7-Tuc model matches all these 3 profiles simultaneously. And since 47-Tuc contains a large population of pulsars, where all of them are millisecond pulsars, it is also important to compare our best fit model with the observed pulsar life-size acceleration distribution. And as I mentioned a few slides ago, the pulsar life-size accelerations are mainly caused by the cluster potential. So they can be used to constrain cluster properties. So in the left panel, the orange dots and the black triangles show the observed pulsar line of sight accelerations. And the 2 green curves show the maximum model line of sight accelerations calculated with this equation here. We can see that all except 1 of the observed pulsar accelerations are bracketed between the 2 green curves, showing that our best fit model, the potential from our best fit model can explain the observed pulsar accelerations. And even the outlier one is bracketed by the maximum possible total accelerations caused by the model potential. And here, the right panel shows the projected radius distribution of all neutron stars and millisecond pulsars. The distribution of the model millisecond pulsars, the orange curve, is consistent with the observed 47-Tuc millisecond pulsars, but the general neutron stars does not agree. And that's because millisecond pulsars, because through the mass transfer process, millisecond pulsars are usually a little bit more massive than the general neutron stars. So through mass segregation, they tend to be closer to the center than all the other neutron stars. Another effect is that if a neutron star happens to be closer to the core, for example, at the center, then it will have a higher chance of having dynamical encounters and have a higher chance to be spun up 2 millisecond pulsars. So combining those 2 reasons, that's why millisecond pulsars are closer to the cluster center, and the model millisecond pulsars agree with the observed millisecond pulsars. And we are also modeling the detailed properties of pulsar binaries in globular clusters. And we want to point out that this can only be done with CMC currently. The figure on the right shows our first attempt to match the companion masses and the orbital periods of cluster pulsar binaries without any fine-tuning of binary evolution. The stars are observed 47-Tuc millisecond pulsars. And just to briefly introduce the different types of pulsar binaries, the black stars are called black widow millisecond pulsars, and they have this spider's name because the pulsar irradiation can ablate the companion and sometimes just blow them away. And similar to how a black widow spider will eat their partner sometimes, so that's why they're called black widow pulsars. And these 3 red stars here are the redback millisecond pulsars, and they're similar to the black widow pulsars because they also have a spider's name. And also the blue dots, the blue stars are what we call the normal type millisecond pulsars with a white dwarf companion. And the triangles and the dots are all model millisecond pulsars over a 2 billion year timescale at around the present day from the cluster simulations. And in particular, the orange dots circled are neutron star main sequence star binaries formed from tidal capture interactions. So I implemented tidal capture into CMC to form these redback millisecond pulsars, which were largely missing in our previous simulations. And for tidal capture between a main sequence star and compact objects, I assume polytropic models for the main sequence stars, following the calculations from these few classical studies. So what happens is that when a neutron star flies close to a main sequence star, the tidal force from the neutron star affects the main sequence star, and the main sequence star can start to oscillate. And this oscillation energy is drawn from the initial total energy of the neutron star and the main sequence star. And in some cases, the tidal dissipation and the dissipation from the oscillation are so large that the total energy of the two stars, the neutron star and the main sequence star, becomes negative. And so these two stars then becomes bound into a binary through tidal capture. And the oscillation energy is calculated with this equation here. So it depends on the mass and the radius of the main sequence star, the mass of the neutron star, and also the inner structure of the main sequence star. And after tidal capture, I immediately circularize the binary orbits so that they are bound and become a circularized binary in a tight orbit. So here, most of the tidal capture binaries are here, and they fall within the range of the orbital periods of the redbacks. But most of the companion masses of the tidal capture binaries are larger than the observed ones. This is because it's unclear if and how neutron stars accrete mass from main sequence stars during tidal capture. And so I should simply assume that neutron stars are spun up to millisecond pulsars without actually changing the mass or the structure of the main sequence stars. But if there is accretion, the main sequence star's mass will certainly decrease and approach the masses of the observed redbacks. Overall, the model pulsars can bracket the observed ones, but it's also obvious that they do not match. I think further studies on neutron star formation and binary evolution will likely improve this match. And we also have detailed information on all different kinds of other compact objects in this 47-Tuc model. So here is an example of the stellar mass black holes in our best fit model. Kazilton et al. 2017 suggested that 47-Tuc may be hosting a 2000 solar mass intermediate mass black hole in order to explain the observed pulsar line of sight accelerations. In our model, most of the black holes form initially. So there are about 1,500 black holes form initially, but then most of them are ejected through subsequent dynamical interactions as the local escape velocity during tidal encounter decrease as a function of time. But there are still about 100, more than 100 black holes. Actually, there's about 200 black holes left. And these 200 black holes have about 2,000 solar mass. So these are all stellar mass black holes retained in 47-Tuc at the present day. And if we combine this information with the result I showed previously, we can see that an intermediate mass black hole in 47-Tuc is not necessary because a group of stellar mass black holes that have similar mass to a potential intermediate mass black hole can also explain the line of sight accelerations of pulsars as I showed a few slides ago. And last but not least, I'll talk about neutron star binary mergers from globular clusters.
Claire, can I ask a quick question? So
sure.
for all those black holes, what's remind me how centrally concentrated do they end up being? Are they really?
They are pretty concentrated actually. So let me skip and show this slide. So this is the, where the black holes are at the present day, and they're mostly at within the core radius of the cluster.
All right. So that's how they can act like the intermediate mass black hole, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks for the question. So I was talking all about cluster dynamics and how they can boost the number of millisecond pulsars. So you might think that maybe it may also produce many binary neutron stars and neutron star black hole mergers. And there are some suggestions that neutron star binary mergers from clusters can take up to about 10% of the total mergers. For example, clusters can produce all potentially observable binary black hole mergers. And the first detection of a binary neutron star merger is in an old non-star forming galaxy, which means it might be in an old globular cluster. And about 10% of the shock gamma ray bursts have large offsets from the galactic center, suggesting that they may originate from dynamically formed compact object binaries in globular clusters. And what's more, the only binary neutron star known in a cluster, at least confirmed in a cluster, has the similar eccentricity and orbital period to a few binary neutron stars observed in the field, suggesting that these binary neutron stars in the field might be kicked out from clusters. But in the following slides, I'm going to show that despite the boost from dynamics and all these suggestions, globular clusters do not produce many binary neutron star mergers or neutron star black hole mergers. And I searched for neutron star binary mergers from a large grid of CMC simulations. These simulations span a wide range in the initial number of stars, the metallicities, sizes of the cluster, and their distances to the galactic center. So this figure is showing the cluster mass on the y-axis and the ratio between the core radii to the half-light radii. And the blue dots is showing the final properties from all the simulations. And the black circles are showing the observed properties of Milky Way globular clusters. And these two sets of dots overlap quite okay. And then one nice thing about these simulations is that the total number of simulations is roughly the same as the total number of globular clusters in the Milky Way. So these cluster simulations are representative of most present-day Milky Way globular clusters, except maybe the very massive ones, like for example, Tuc up there. And in globular clusters, the dynamics of neutron stars and black holes is tightly coupled because of mass segregation, where more massive objects tend to sink further to the center of a cluster. Black holes dominate cluster centers, and dynamical encounters between black holes and other stars can then heat up the cluster and prevent neutron stars from moving to the center if there are many black holes. So in this plot to the right is a 2D projection of a typical core collapse cluster. There are few black holes in this type of clusters, so only one in this case. And the neutron stars concentrate at the center. But then on the left is a typical non-core collapse cluster. This cluster has many black holes, 116 in this case. And so the neutron stars are prevented from sinking to the center. So basically a decreasing number of black holes correspond to more concentrated neutron stars from the cluster center. And since the core of a cluster is the densest part of a cluster and most dynamical interactions happen there, fewer black holes also means more encounters for the neutron stars. typical globular clusters can have as many as 100 black holes retained. So in these clusters, like the one in the left, neutron stars are further out and don't have many chances to form binaries with another neutron star or black hole. This is also shown in the number of millisecond pulsars. So the number of millisecond pulsars in a cluster is anti-correlated with the number of black holes. For clusters with more than 100 black holes, there can be at most about 2 millisecond pulsars. But for clusters with only 1 or 2 black holes, there can be as many as 16 millisecond pulsars. So how many neutron star binary mergers are there in these cluster simulations? This plot shows all the neutron star binaries that merge within a Hubble time in 144 simulations. The red circles are neutron star, binary neutron stars formed from dynamical interactions, and the green circles are neutron star black hole binaries, also formed from dynamical interactions. Most of these mergers happen at the late times of a cluster's evolution, so they can potentially be observed by LIGO and Virgo. But it is also very obvious from this plot that the total number of mergers are very small. So these are the numbers in 144 simulations. So remember, neutron stars only occupy the centers of core collapse clusters, and only around the center can neutron stars get plenty of encounters to form binaries. And in the Milky Way, about 20% of globular clusters are core collapse, which is not too many. So the overall total number of neutron star binary mergers from globular cluster is very low. And to conclude part 3, dynamics doesn't play an important role in enhancing the binary neutron star and neutron star black hole merger rates. So here shows the merger rates of neutron star binaries from clusters as a function of redshift. The merger rate is about 0.01 to 0.07 per gigaparsec cube per year in the local universe for both binary neutron stars and neutron star black holes. And the LIGO-Virgo merger rate estimates can be as large as 1,000 for binary neutron stars and about 600 for neutron star black holes. So note that these are the old rates and not the latest rates from O3. The comparison between these rates and are shown in the inset here. So the number of neutron star binary mergers from globular clusters are about 10 to the 5 times smaller than the LIGO-Virgo estimates. And this shows that globular clusters are not a good place to look for neutron star binary mergers. And here are the conclusion of this talk. So I first show how we model millisecond pulsars in globular clusters. I show that electron-capture supernova and accretion-induced collapse with low kicks for neutron stars are very important for neutron star retention in globular clusters, and that the dynamical interactions can greatly enhance the millisecond pulsar formation rates. And I also show our best fit model for example, TUC, and show that single tidal capture could potentially lead to the observed redback millisecond pulsars. And last but not least, there are not many neutron star binary mergers from globular clusters, and the merger rate is about 10 to the 5 times smaller than the LIGO-Virgo estimates. And that's my talk.
Great, thank you, Claire. This was a very nice talk. We have
Thank you.
plenty of time for questions if people have any more. Tony?
So yeah, so the neutron star rate, that's really small compared to the LIGO rate. It's interesting. Can you remind me for black hole binaries, how is it compared to the LIGO rate in that case? You had that?
Yeah, I don't have that here, but it is pretty close to the LIGO Virgo rates.
Right. And then what about if you, you did black holes, you've done neutron stars. What if you throw some white dwarfs in there? Like, There's been suggestions that some exotic transients people see, like the calcium-rich novae, could be white dwarf neutron star mergers. What do you expect the white dwarfs to do if you threw them into the mix?
Yeah, so we have white dwarf already into the mix. And I didn't specifically look at white dwarf neutron star, mergers from our simulations. Maybe Kyle has looked at it, but I did look at the cataclysmic variables from the 47 Tuc model specifically. And our predict number of the cataclysmic variables from 47 Tuc is pretty close to the observed X-ray sources in 47 Tuc. So that at least also show that our model produced these systems relatively close to the observations.
And those are defined as main sequence white dwarf mergers or captures?
Yeah, we have a very broad brush definition of these systems, and that's exactly what's happening. White dwarf main sequence star binaries that are transferring mass to the white dwarf.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ilva, you have a question?
Yes. Thank you so much, Claire. It was a very nice talk. I wanted to ask, you showed this plot where you create a millisecond pulsar, but it took like 10 giga-years or so. Is it always very slow to create millisecond pulsars, or are there cases when it can be much faster? Exactly that one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if a millisecond pulsar happen to be in a primordial binary, for example, or a neutron star that's in a primordial binary, then you can have a millisecond pulsar maybe as early as 1 giga-year in the cluster's evolution, so around that time. But most of the dynamical interactions kicked in after a lot of the black holes are kicked out from the cluster. So that takes a little bit time. And so most of the dynamical interactions for neutron stars kicking at about 6 giga-year. That's why it took some time to form millisecond pulsars that way.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions? Not seeing any, so in that case, let's thank Claire again for a really nice talk, and thanks everyone else for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.